The rancher saved an Apache woman from drowning, and now she won't stop following him everywhere. Tom had lived all his life on the ranch, far from the busy towns and noisy streets. His home was surrounded by wide-open fields, dense woods, and the slow, steady flow of the river that cut through the land. The ranch was large but quiet, and Tom liked it that way. He enjoyed the calm mornings, when the mist hung low over the grass and the first rays of sunlight painted the hills in soft gold. Life was simple, predictable, and safe, until that summer afternoon changed everything. It was hotter than usual that day. The sun blazed down on the dry grass, and Tom wiped the sweat from his brow as he moved from fence to fence, checking on his cattle. He was used to the rhythm of ranch work, feeding the animals, mending fences, repairing tools, and walking the land to make sure nothing had gone wrong overnight. The river, usually a quiet and peaceful place, sparkled in the sunlight, and Tom had made a mental note to check the water level later, as recent rains had made it higher than normal. As he walked along the bank, he heard a sound that made him stop immediately. At first he thought it was the wind or the splash of a fish, but then he heard it again. Someone struggling, their voice calling for help, though weak and almost lost in the roar of the current. Tom's heart skipped a beat. He looked down the river and saw movement that didn't belong there. A figure, small, struggling, was being tossed and turned by the fast current. The water had grown dangerous after the recent rains, and anyone caught in it could easily be swept away. Without thinking, Tom dropped his tools and ran toward the edge of the river, his boots sinking into the muddy ground. The woman in the river was panicking. Her arms flailed and her hair, dark and tangled, clung to her wet face. Tom realized immediately that she couldn't swim against the current. She looked terrified, and there was a raw desperation in her eyes that made Tom's chest tighten. He had faced danger many times in his life, storms, wild animals, broken fences, but nothing compared to the fear he felt seeing a human life at risk right before him. He didn't hesitate. Tom jumped into the river. The water was cold and strong, pulling at him as he swam toward her. Each stroke was a battle against the current, each second a fight to reach her before it was too late. He called out to her, trying to guide her toward him, but the water swallowed most of his voice. Finally, he was close enough to grab her. She struggled against him at first, flailing in panic, but he held her tight, keeping her head above the water. The current tried to push them downstream, but Tom was strong and determined. Inch by inch, he fought his way to the riverbank. When they finally reached the shore, both were soaked and exhausted. Tom lay back for a moment, catching his breath, while the woman gasped, coughing and shivering. Her clothes clung to her body, and her skin was pale from the cold water. She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. She didn't speak, but the fear and relief in her expression were clear. Tom wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, offering what warmth he could. She trembled violently, and he could feel how fragile she was after the ordeal. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, though he already knew the answer. She nodded weakly, but the nod was uncertain, almost like she wasn't sure if she could trust the safety yet. He offered her a drink of water from his flask, and she accepted, her hand shaking as she held it. Tom sat with her for several minutes, letting her regain her strength. The river had calmed down a bit now, but the danger of getting swept away again was still very real. Once she was steadier, Tom tried to speak to her. "Do you live around here?" he asked. She shook her head. Her voice was soft, barely audible. "No, just traveling," she said, her words broken, accented, and careful. Tom didn't push her for details. She had just survived something terrifying, and he could see that she was scared of being anywhere alone, near or far from the river. He noticed the marks on her arms, scrapes from the rocks in the river, dirt in her hair, and a small bruise forming on her shoulder. It was clear she had been fighting for her life. Tom reached into his first aid kit in his truck and cleaned the wounds as best he could. She flinched at first but stayed quiet, letting him help. She didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, but Tom could see how grateful she was just by the way her eyes followed his movements, wide and alert. After he finished, Tom looked at her, unsure what to do next. He couldn't leave her alone in the woods, not after what had just happened. "You should rest," he said. "I have a place nearby. You can sit, eat something, dry off. Then you can decide where you want to go?" She hesitated, looking around nervously. Finally, she nodded slightly and followed him. The walk back to the ranch was quiet. The woman didn't speak much, but she stayed close, matching his pace. Tom noticed small details, the way she carefully avoided stepping on sharp rocks, the way she clutched the blanket around her shoulders, and the way her eyes darted toward the river occasionally, as if fearing it might pull her back. He realized she was not just physically shaken, but emotionally fragile too. When they arrived at the ranch, Tom guided her to a small guest cabin he kept for visitors or workers. It was simple but comfortable, with a bed, a fire, and clean water. He set her down and made her a warm cup of tea. The steam rose in soft curls, and she inhaled it deeply, as if it brought a sense of safety she hadn't felt in a long time. Tom didn't rush her. He gave her space, offering food, blankets, and water while keeping a watchful eye. Over the next few hours, the woman began to relax slightly. She still flinched at sudden noises, but she smiled faintly when Tom brought her a warm meal. He could tell she was slowly regaining her strength, and though she didn't say much, he understood her gratitude. She had been in real danger, and he had saved her. But even now he wondered who she was, where she came from, and why she had been near the river alone. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Tom sat on the porch of the cabin, watching the river flow calmly. He thought about the events of the day and realized something important. Life on the ranch would never be the same. The simple, quiet rhythm he had known all his life had been interrupted by a stranger, a woman whose life he had saved. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he knew that he couldn't forget what had happened. The river had taken her almost, but he had acted, and she was alive because of him. As night fell, he made sure she was comfortable, wrapped in blankets, and offered her a quiet reassurance. "You're safe now," he said softly. She looked at him with eyes that spoke more than words ever could. Gratitude, relief, and a hint of something else, something unspoken, shone in her gaze. Tom nodded and left her to rest, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and worry. He had done the right thing, but he couldn't shake the feeling that her appearance at his riverbank was just the beginning of something bigger, something that might change both of their lives in ways he could not yet imagine. That night, as Tom lay in his own bed, he couldn't stop thinking about the woman. He thought about her bravery, her fear, and the silent strength he had seen in her eyes. He wondered who she was, and why she had been alone near the river. And deep down he knew that tomorrow might bring more surprises than he had ever faced in his quiet life on the ranch. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had saved a life, and in doing so had opened the door to a story that had only just begun. The morning after the river rescue, Tom woke early, as he always did. The ranch had its own rhythm, and he liked to move with it. He went outside, taking a deep breath of the cool morning air, feeling the soft mist on his face. The sun was just beginning to rise over the hills, and the light painted the landscape in warm gold and green. He walked toward the barn, planning to check on the cattle and make sure everything was in order after the previous day's heat. But as he passed the small path leading from the woods, he stopped. There she was. Ayana, the woman he had rescued from the river, stood quietly at the edge of the property. She didn't call out, didn't wave, didn't make any sudden movements. She just stood there, her dark eyes watching him as he approached. Tom was surprised. He had expected her to leave, perhaps to find shelter elsewhere, or to return to her journey. But here she was, still near him, still watching. For a moment he didn't know what to do. "Good morning," he said carefully, trying not to startle her. She didn't answer immediately. She just tilted her head slightly, as if listening, observing, making sure he was friendly. Finally she spoke, her voice soft, almost musical, and broken by the accents of her language.
Mmm. Mmm.
"Morning," she said. It was brief, but it was enough to show she recognized him and felt some level of safety near him. Tom gestured toward the cabin where she had stayed. "Do you want some breakfast?" he asked. She nodded. Slowly she followed him, moving carefully over the uneven ground, keeping her eyes on the grass, the rocks, the river in the distance. Every movement she made showed caution, but also curiosity. Tom noticed how alert she was, how she seemed to take in everything around her. It reminded him that she had spent much of her life moving through dangerous places, relying on her senses to survive. Inside the cabin, he prepared a simple breakfast: eggs, bread, and some fresh milk. Ayana watched silently, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak, but the way her eyes followed his movements showed interest and, slowly, trust. When he offered her a plate, she took it gently, almost as if afraid to drop it, and ate quietly. Tom sat across from her, eating as well, occasionally glancing at her to make sure she was comfortable. But he realized that her silence wasn't rudeness. It was caution. She had been through danger, and she needed to feel safe before speaking freely. After breakfast, Tom suggested she come with him to check on the cattle. At first, she hesitated. The thought of stepping out into the open, away from the relative safety of the cabin, seemed to worry her. But after a moment, she nodded, and together they walked toward the fields. She stayed close to him, sometimes reaching out to steady herself on his arm when the ground was uneven. Tom noticed that she was careful, graceful, and observant. Her movement showed a knowledge of the land, even though she had never been on his ranch before. Over the next few days, Ayana continued to appear around the ranch. Sometimes she helped with chores, quietly collecting firewood, or bringing water from the well. She rarely spoke, but her presence was noticeable. Tom found himself watching her, not just for what she could do, but for the small ways she was learning and adapting. She was patient, careful, and intelligent, and slowly, Tom began to understand that her return was not an accident. She trusted him. She felt safe near him. The neighbors had started noticing her too. Some of them whispered to each other, curious about the woman who seemed to follow Tom wherever he went. But Ayana didn't interact with anyone except him. She didn't seem interested in people who were strangers, only in the man who had saved her from the river. Tom, for his part, didn't pay much attention to the gossip. He was more concerned with making sure she had what she needed and that she was safe. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in. Dark clouds covered the sky and the wind picked up, rattling the windows and shaking the trees. Tom was in the barn, checking on the cattle, when he noticed Ayana moving quickly to secure the feed and water. She was calm but purposeful, her actions showing that she knew how to act in a crisis. When lightning struck nearby, she froze for a moment, but Tom went to her side and guided her to safety under the barn roof. She stayed close, and he realized that she had learned to rely on him as much as he had learned to watch over her. Tom began to teach her more about ranch life. He showed her how to mend fences, feed the animals properly, and handle small tasks that were necessary every day. Ayanna learned quickly. She was careful but determined, and Tom admired her dedication. She asked questions, sometimes softly, and listened closely to his answers. Though she rarely spoke about her past, Tom began to see a quiet strength in her. She had survived the river, yes, but she had also survived hardship in other ways he could only guess. One evening, as they sat outside after finishing their chores, Ayanna spoke more than she had since the rescue. "River, strong," she said. "You." Tom nodded. "Yes," he replied simply. "It was dangerous, but I'm glad you're safe now." She smiled faintly, a small curve of her lips that lit up her face. It was the first real expression of relief and trust he had seen from her, and it made him feel a deep sense of connection. As the days turned into a week, Tom realized that Ayanna's presence had become a normal part of his life. She followed him to the fields, helped with the animals, and even started learning the layout of the ranch on her own. At first, he had been surprised, unsure why she stayed so close, but over time he understood. She wasn't just following him blindly. She was learning, protecting herself, and beginning to feel a sense of belonging. The river had almost taken her, but now, in a way, the ranch had become her new safe place. Tom also noticed small, thoughtful actions from her that showed she cared about him. She would bring fresh water to him while he worked, gather firewood before he asked, and warn him of small dangers he might not notice, like a snake sunning itself near the barn, or a weak fence post that might give way. Her instincts and knowledge of the land complemented his experience perfectly. Slowly, Tom realized that her presence was no longer just about gratitude. She had become a companion, someone whose skills and attention mattered as much as her survival did. Neighbors continued to whisper, curious about this unusual pair. Some were suspicious, others intrigued, but Tom didn't mind. He knew that Ayanna trusted him, and that was all that mattered. Over time, he began to rely on her too, appreciating her company and the quiet way she seemed to understand him. Together they worked, laughed quietly at small mistakes, and shared the simple satisfaction of a day well spent on the ranch. By the end of the second week, Tom and Ayanna had formed a routine. She would follow him everywhere, helping with the chores, observing his work, and gradually learning to anticipate his needs. He had learned to communicate with her without many words, understanding her signals and gestures, and Ayanna, in turn, had learned that the ranch was not a dangerous place, but a home where she could feel safe, strong, and valued. One night, as they sat by the fire after a long day, Tom thought about how much had changed in just a short time. The woman he had saved from the river was no longer just a stranger. She was a presence in his life that he had come to rely on, a silent companion who had brought unexpected warmth, care, and awareness into his quiet world. And though he didn't yet know what the future held, he felt certain that her arrival at the riverbank was not just chance. It was the beginning of something important, something neither of them could have predicted. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet rhythm of ranch life slowly began to include Ayanna in ways that Tom had never imagined. At first, she had simply been a presence, a young woman who seemed to follow him wherever he went, careful, watchful, and silent. But now her confidence was growing. She moved around the ranch with a natural ease, learning each small task, understanding the patterns of the animals, and quietly observing the land in ways that even Tom had not noticed before. Tom watched her one morning as she approached the herd of cattle. She didn't rush, didn't make sudden movements, and spoke softly when guiding the animals. Tom realized that she had a way of moving that commanded attention without demanding it, a skill born from years of living carefully and paying close attention to the world around her. "You've got a good way with them," he said, genuinely impressed. Ayanna nodded, her dark eyes shining with pride. Though she didn't speak much, her actions said more than words ever could. It wasn't long before Tom began teaching her more complicated ranch work. He showed her how to check fences for weaknesses, how to identify signs of sickness in the animals, and even how to use basic tools to repair barns and gates. Ayanna learned quickly. Her hands were steady, her focus sharp, and she asked questions, not many, but the ones she asked showed careful thought. Tom realized that her quiet presence was deceptive. She was intelligent, observant, and deeply aware of the land and its rhythms. One afternoon, a sudden emergency tested their growing teamwork. Tom had been checking the far pasture when he noticed that a young calf had gotten tangled in a broken fence post. It was struggling, panicked, and the fence threatened to trap it completely. Without hesitation, Ayanna ran ahead, assessing the situation before Tom could even reach her. She knelt beside the calf, speaking softly, her hands moving quickly to free it. Tom was amazed at her confidence and skill. Together, they worked to untangle the calf and secure the fence. When it was safe, Ayanna looked at him with a quiet smile. "Safe now," she said simply. Tom nodded, impressed not just by her ability, but by the calm assurance she displayed under pressure. The stormy afternoon made Tom realize something important. Ayanna wasn't just following him out of gratitude. She had a purpose. She wanted to be near him because she had found a safe place where she could belong, where her instincts and skills were valued. And Tom, in turn, began to see that he relied on her presence more than he had expected. He had saved her life, yes, but she was now helping him in ways that made the ranch run more smoothly, more safely. Over time, their relationship developed in small, subtle ways. Ayanna began to share parts of her past, carefully, as if testing the waters before revealing too much. She spoke of her childhood in the Apache lands, of the lessons her elders had taught her about survival and respect for the earth, and of the times she had traveled alone. Tom listened quietly, understanding that these stories were precious to her. She didn't need to say much. The details she offered were enough to show him the strength, resilience, and wisdom she carried with her. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Tom and Ayanna sat on a small wooden fence near the edge of the pasture. The air was warm, the grass soft beneath their feet, and the distant sound of the river added a peaceful rhythm to the moment. "You trust me?" Tom asked quietly. Ayanna looked at him, her dark eyes meeting his, and nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "You helped me." Tom smiled gently, feeling the weight of that simple statement. Trust was not something she gave lightly, and he knew that earning it had been as much a part of their bond as the river rescue itself. Their daily routine settled into a comfortable pattern. Ayanna helped with chores, watched over the animals, and occasionally surprised Tom with small acts of foresight. She would notice a weakened fence post, alert him to signs of illness in the livestock, or point out subtle changes in the weather. Tom found himself relying on her observations, appreciating the way her instincts often guided him in ways he hadn't anticipated. He began to realize that she had become more than just someone he had saved. She had become a partner in running the ranch, someone whose presence made the work lighter and safer. But it wasn't just about work. Ayanna also began to show a softer side, one that reflected her growing comfort in Tom's presence. She would gather fresh flowers from the fields, place them in small jars in the cabin, and sometimes hum quietly while working. These small gestures, simple yet meaningful, showed that she was starting to feel at home. Tom noticed them, of course, and while he rarely commented, he appreciated the thoughtfulness behind each action. Their bond was growing in layers: trust, respect, and quiet companionship, all built on the foundation of the river rescue. Tom also began to share parts of his life with her, though carefully. He spoke of his childhood on the ranch, the lessons his father had taught him, and the routines that had shaped him into the man he was. Ayanna listened intently, occasionally asking questions that showed genuine curiosity. Her eyes would light up when he told stories about the animals or the land, or the small challenges he had faced over the years. It was clear that she valued not just his help, but the world he had built for himself. Their connection deepened one afternoon when Tom injured his hand while repairing a fence. Ayanna noticed immediately, her eyes widening in concern. Without hesitation, she fetched the first aid kit, cleaned the wound, and bandaged it carefully. Her hands were steady, her attention focused, and she worked quickly, ensuring the injury was properly treated. Tom watched her, impressed by her skill and dedication. "You've got steady hands," he said quietly. She smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement of the praise, and Tom realized that her presence was more than helpful. It was invaluable. As the weeks passed, Tom began to notice something else. Ayanna had a keen awareness of the land that complemented his own experience. She could read the sky for signs of approaching storms, sense changes in the river's flow, and notice subtle movements in the animals that indicated unease or discomfort. Her instincts were sharp, honed from years of living close to nature, and Tom found himself learning from her as much as she was learning from him. Their partnership was becoming symbiotic, two people from different worlds finding balance and understanding through shared work and shared trust. Despite the growing comfort between them, Ayanna still had moments of hesitation. Sometimes she would pause at the edge of the woods, glancing nervously at the trees as if remembering the dangers she had faced before. Tom never pushed her. He understood that trust and security were earned slowly, and he allowed her the space she needed to feel safe. Over time, she began to explore the ranch more freely, moving with confidence and curiosity, yet always returning to him for guidance or reassurance. One afternoon, while they were repairing a section of fence together, Ayanna stopped and pointed to the distant hills. "Storm coming," she said simply. Tom looked up and noticed the clouds rolling in, dark and heavy. True to her warning, rain began to fall within minutes. Together they worked quickly to secure the animals and protect the supplies. Tom realized that her instincts were more than useful. They were vital. Without her awareness and quick thinking, the sudden storm could have caused serious damage. By the end of part 3, it was clear that their relationship had grown far beyond the simple rescue that had brought them together. Ayanna was no longer just the young woman who had survived the river. She was a trusted companion, a partner in daily life, and a source of unexpected knowledge and skill. Tom had begun to rely on her, not just for help with the ranch, but for guidance, companionship, and understanding. And Ayanna, in turn, had found safety, purpose, and a sense of belonging in the rancher's quiet world, a world that was slowly becoming her home. The bond between them was subtle, almost unspoken, yet strong. It was built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Where Tom understood that rescuing someone's life sometimes meant opening your world to them, and Ayanna had done exactly that. She had become a part of his life, quietly, steadily, and irrevocably. And as the sun set behind the hills, casting long shadows over the fields, Tom knew that their story was only beginning. The river had brought them together, but the land, the work, and their growing connection were what would keep them side by side, facing whatever challenges the future might bring. The days on the ranch had grown warm and long, and the rhythm of life had settled into a comfortable routine. Tom and Ayanna worked side by side almost every day. Their bond had deepened over weeks of shared labor, quiet conversations, and subtle gestures of trust and care. But life on the ranch was never entirely predictable, and one particular morning would test the strength of their connection in ways neither of them could have imagined. It began with an unusually loud rustling in the trees at the far edge of the property. Tom was checking the fence line when he noticed the movement, shadows flitting between the trunks, the sound of hurried footsteps crunching over dry leaves. He paused, instinctively alert, and called Ayanna over. She came quickly, her dark eyes scanning the area with calm precision. She didn't speak, but Tom could see the tension in her body. Something was wrong. Suddenly, a large coyote emerged from the underbrush and made a beeline for the herd of cattle. The animals panicked, their lowing filling the air as they scattered in all directions. Tom ran toward them, shouting and waving his arms, but the coyote was clever and quick, darting through the herd with dangerous speed. Ayanna moved beside him, her presence calm yet purposeful. She guided the animals gently, using small gestures and soft sounds, helping them regroup while Tom chased the predator away. Her instincts were sharp, almost like she could anticipate the animals' movements before they happened. Tom realized once again that her presence was not just helpful, it was vital. Later that afternoon, after the excitement had passed and the animals were settled, Tom reflected on the incident. He knew the ranch could be dangerous at times, and he realized that having Ayanna there had changed everything. She had a natural awareness of the land, a quiet intuition that complemented his experience perfectly. He began to think of her not just as someone he had rescued, but as a partner, someone whose skills, loyalty, and courage he could trust without question. Ayanna herself was beginning to show subtle signs of independence. She moved confidently around the ranch, taking small responsibilities upon herself. She collected water from the well, prepared firewood for the cabin, and even began tending a small vegetable patch near the house. Tom noticed these efforts and appreciated them, though he rarely commented. Her actions spoke louder than words ever could, showing care for the land, the animals, and him. One evening, a more serious test arrived in the form of a storm. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon, moving quickly across the hills. The wind picked up, carrying dust and debris across the fields, and Tom knew that heavy rain and possible lightning were imminent. He was preparing to secure the animals and supplies when he noticed Ayanna moving with focused purpose, gathering tools and securing loose items that could be swept away by the wind. She worked quickly, efficiently, and without hesitation. When lightning struck a nearby tree, splintering it dangerously close to the barn, Tom realized the full value of Ayanna's presence. She had already guided the animals to safety, checked the fences, and ensured that everything was secure. Together they rode out the storm, side by side, weathering the heavy rain and gusting winds. Tom felt a deep sense of gratitude and trust. Ayanna was more than a companion. She was someone he could rely on in moments of danger. After the storm passed, the land was soaked, the animals tired but safe, and the ranch intact. Tom and Ayanna worked together to repair minor damage and clean up debris. As they moved about the property, Tom watched her closely. She was tireless, focused, and determined, moving with a grace and strength that belied her quiet nature. Bear. He realized that her loyalty and courage were qualities that couldn't be taught. They came from experience, resilience, and perhaps, in some ways, from the life she had led before meeting him. Ayanna, too, seemed to sense the growing bond between them. She was careful, respectful, and attentive, always observing Tom's actions and responding without hesitation. She had begun to anticipate his needs, whether it was carrying supplies to the right place, fetching tools before he asked, or simply offering a steady presence during moments of tension. Her loyalty was evident in every small act, every glance, and every careful gesture. One afternoon, while checking the far pasture, Tom twisted his ankle on a hidden rock. He stumbled, falling to the ground with a sharp pain shooting through his leg. Ayanna was immediately at his side, her face a mask of concern. She supported him, helping him to a nearby tree for stability. Her hands were gentle but firm, guiding him as he assessed the injury. Tom knew that alone he would have struggled to make it back to the cabin, but with Ayanna's help, he managed to walk slowly, leaning on her steady support. Once they reached the cabin, she cleaned the small cuts on his leg, wrapped it carefully, and ensured he had water and rest. Tom watched her, impressed not only by her skill but by her instinctive care. She didn't speak much, but her actions communicated everything he needed to know. She was dependable, aware, and courageous, a combination that few people possessed. In that moment, Tom realized that she had become an integral part of his life, someone whose presence he could no longer imagine being without. Their connection deepened in ways that went beyond daily chores. They shared quiet conversations in the evenings, often sitting by the fire after long days of work. Ayanna spoke softly about her experiences before coming to the ranch, the lessons she had learned, the dangers she had faced, and the moments of fear and courage that had shaped her. Tom listened carefully, understanding that every word, every pause was significant. These stories revealed not only her past, but also the inner strength that had allowed her to survive and adapt. Tom, in turn, began to share pieces of his life. He spoke of his childhood on the ranch, the responsibilities he had learned from his parents, and the simple pleasures of a life connected to the land. Ayanna listened, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest. Their conversations were quiet, meaningful, and respectful, building a foundation of trust and understanding that strengthened their bond. Over time, Ayanna began to display qualities that went beyond skill and loyalty. She showed bravery and initiative that impressed Tom more than he could express. One afternoon, a loose section of fence threatened to trap a young calf. Ayanna acted immediately, securing the area and freeing the calf before Tom even arrived. Her quick thinking and calm presence prevented what could have been a disaster. Tom realized that her courage wasn't just in surviving danger. It was in facing it head-on, without hesitation, and using her knowledge and instincts to protect those around her. Neighbors occasionally remarked on her presence at the ranch, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. But Tom didn't mind. He knew that her actions and loyalty were genuine. She had chosen to stay, not because she had to, but because she wanted to, and he, in turn, had come to value her presence in ways he hadn't expected. Their partnership was growing, built on mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. By the end of Part 4, it was clear that their relationship had become something rare and valuable. Ayanna was no longer just the young woman rescued from the river. She had become a trusted partner, a source of courage, skill, and insight that Tom relied on daily. Their bond was quiet but strong, built on shared challenges, small victories, and the understanding that each could depend on the other. Tom reflected on the journey they had shared so far. From the moment he had pulled her from the river, their lives had intertwined in ways that neither could have predicted. She had grown stronger, braver, and more confident, while he had learned to trust, appreciate, and respect the presence of someone who had once been a stranger. And though challenges would continue to come, he knew that together they could face whatever the ranch, the land, or life might bring. The seasons were changing on the ranch. The hot summer had slowly given way to cooler days, and the air carried the crisp, fresh scent of approaching autumn. Tom walked along the fence line one morning, noting the way the sunlight glinted off the dew-soaked grass. When he noticed Ayanna following him as usual, she moved quietly behind him, careful not to startle the animals, her eyes alert to every movement, every sound. Over the weeks and months, her presence had become so natural that Tom barely noticed it anymore, except in moments like this, when he realized just how much he relied on her. Their routine was now seamless. Together they checked the cattle, repaired fences, and maintained the barn. Ayanna had become skilled at every task, her instincts and careful observation complementing Tom's years of experience. She anticipated problems before they arose, guided the animals calmly, and helped keep the land in order. But beyond the work, there was something else, an unspoken connection that had grown steadily, quietly, and naturally. They trusted each other in ways that were rare, understanding each other without needing many words. One afternoon, a small crisis tested the strength of their partnership. A sudden fire had started near the edge of the ranch, likely caused by a lightning strike. Smoke rose quickly, and flames began to spread across the dry grass. Tom ran toward the danger, shouting instructions, while Ayanna moved with precision and calm determination. She helped him direct the cattle to safety, fetched buckets of water from the river, and guided him around dangerous spots. Her awareness of the land and her ability to act quickly kept them both safe and prevented what could have been a disaster. After the fire was under control, they stood together, panting and covered in ash and sweat. Tom looked at Ayanna and felt a deep gratitude and respect. She wasn't just someone he had saved from the river. She was now a trusted companion whose bravery and quick thinking had protected the ranch, the animals, and him. Her loyalty and courage had proven themselves over and over again, and he knew he could count on her in any situation. In the days that followed, life on the ranch continued, but the bond between them had grown even stronger. They worked side by side, sharing the small joys and challenges of everyday life. Ayanna's quiet gestures of care, preparing meals, gathering firewood, tending to the animals, were part of their routine now. Tom noticed the small details, the way she arranged fresh flowers on the table, the way she remembered the tasks he would need done, the way she seemed to anticipate problems before they happened. It was clear that she had made herself at home, and that her presence was no longer temporary or uncertain. As autumn deepened, Tom realized that their connection went beyond work. There were quiet moments, sitting by the fire after a long day, where they shared stories, hopes, and dreams. Ayanna spoke about her childhood among the Apache, the lessons she had learned about courage, survival, and respect for the land. Tom shared memories of his own life, the early mornings on the ranch, the lessons his parents had taught him, and the pride he felt in maintaining the land. These moments, simple and unhurried, built a foundation of understanding and trust that was stronger than either of them had expected. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the hills, Tom and Ayanna sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. The air was cool, carrying the scent of autumn leaves and the distant river. Tom turned to Ayanna and spoke quietly, "You've changed this place, and me. I don't know what I would do without you now." She looked at him, her dark eyes soft, and nodded. Her hand brushed lightly against his in a gesture of quiet acknowledgement, a small but meaningful sign of the bond they shared. From that day forward, it became clear that Ayanna's presence was permanent. She had arrived at the ranch as someone in need of help, but she stayed as someone who brought strength, skill, and warmth. The ranch was no longer just Tom's quiet refuge. It was a shared home, a place where both of them could rely on each other and build a life together. Their days were filled with work, yes, but also with laughter, shared meals, quiet walks, and the comfort of companionship. The winter approached, and with it came its own challenges: cold mornings, icy riverbanks, and the need to prepare the animals and the land for the harsh months ahead. Tom and Ayanna faced these tasks together, their teamwork seamless. She would gather firewood, feed the animals, and check the fences, while he tended to the heavier work, and together they planned for the safety and well-being of the ranch. Her knowledge of the land and her careful observation were invaluable, and Tom realized that the partnership they had formed was now indispensable. There were moments of quiet reflection as well. On a snowy afternoon, Tom watched Ayanna helping the animals in the barn. Her movements were careful, deliberate, and full of care. He felt a wave of admiration for her strength, courage, and loyalty. She had come to him as a stranger in danger, and she had become someone who not only trusted him completely, but who also gave her trust, skill, and loyalty in return. Tom understood that this bond was rare, something to be cherished, nurtured, and protected. By spring, it was clear that the ranch had changed, and so had their lives. Tom no longer saw Ayanna as just the woman he had rescued. She was a part of his world, a constant presence whose guidance, courage, and companionship enriched every day. She had transformed the ranch into a place of shared purpose, laughter, and connection, and she had transformed him, showing him the value of trust, patience, and quiet partnership. Their friendship had blossomed into a deep bond that neither had anticipated. They faced challenges together: storms, wild animals, difficult tasks, but they also shared small joys: tending to a calf, harvesting vegetables, watching sunsets, or simply enjoying the quiet of the land. Each moment strengthened their connection, creating a life built on respect, trust, and care. Ayanna, who had once been a stranger saved from the river, now had a home, purpose, and a sense of belonging. Tom, who had lived a quiet, predictable life, now had a companion, a partner, and a friend whose presence enriched his days and brought meaning to his work. Together they faced the future with confidence, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. The river that had once been a place of danger and fear had become a symbol of life and connection. It was the place where Tom had saved Ayanna, but it was also the place where their bond had begun. And as they worked, laughed, and lived together on the ranch, they understood that the true meaning of rescue was not just saving a life, it was opening one's heart to someone else, building trust, and creating a shared world filled with care, courage, and companionship. By the end of the story, it was clear that Ayanna's decision to stay was not just about gratitude. It was about finding a place where she belonged. And for Tom, saving her life had brought more than the satisfaction of helping someone in need. It had brought companionship, trust, and a new chapter in his life that was richer, fuller, and more meaningful than he had ever imagined. Together they had created a life on the ranch that was safe, fulfilling, and full of quiet joy. The woman who had once been in danger was now a trusted partner, and the man who had once lived alone had found a companion who shared his world, his work, and his heart. Their story, which had begun on the river bank with an act of courage and compassion, had grown into a lasting bond that would guide them through every season, challenge, and triumph that lay ahead. And in that shared life, they found something rare and precious: trust, loyalty, and the knowledge that true friendship and care can turn strangers into family, and a single act of kindness can change lives forever.